not only that Donald Trump is a failure and a fraud, but understand the people that are his accomplices that are helping him to accomplish this. We are going to shed light on all the darkness that he is bringing on the United States. And I think that that is what we all should want for good governance.
Señores, Donald Trump está atravesando por el peor momento en su presidencia. No solo porque este proyecto de ley que acaba de imponer en el Congreso es el más impopular en la historia moderna, sino porque se encuentra en medio del escándalo más grave de sus 2 mandatos, que es el encubrimiento del caso Epstein. Y como siempre, cuando él está acorralado, recurre a la mentira. Ahora está intentando arrastrar al expresidente Barack Obama a esta conspiración absurda, ¿no? Culpándolo por unos documentos que supuestamente él escribió, escondió o inventó. Y literalmente ni siquiera él sabe lo que está diciendo. Pero en esta ocasión, Obama no se ha quedado callado. Y su respuesta, señores, podría significar un desastre electoral para Donald Trump. Antes de que entremos en lleno en cómo Obama está contraatacando, quiero que veamos cómo es que hemos llegado hasta este punto. Y para eso escuchemos lo que dijo Jasmine Crockett sobre la manipulación política que está ocurriendo en el estado de Texas.
You said it real nice. They cheating. They are cheating. Say what it is, okay? Listen, if your policies are so popular, Mr. President, then trust that the American people are happy. And so you don't have to worry about the fact that the Democrats actually should have control of the House right now. The Republicans cheated in the state of North Carolina to make sure that they could get 3 pickups. And guess what? Ultimately, they ended up controlling the House by exactly 3 seats because once they ended up controlling that Supreme Court, they redistricted, and unfortunately now they have 10 Republicans that are elected from the House, and they have 4 Democrats when it used to be 7-7. And when you looked at the election results, it was Donald Trump who barely won the state, but then it was Democrats that won the state on all the other statewide elected positions, which tells you it's about a 50-50 state, which means that congressionally it should have been about 50-50. So the seats were correct before. Now, because he knows that if Democrats take control, regardless of how the American people feel about the Democrats right now, one thing we are going to do is we're going to block him. That's the one thing I can tell you. If you give us control of the House, we will stop some of the pain that he is inflicting. We will stop some of the idiocy, and we will actually conduct some real oversight over this administration, which is paramount so that ultimately the American people can understand not only that Donald Trump is a failure and a fraud, but understand the people that are his accomplices that are helping him to accomplish this. We are going to shed light on all the darkness that he is bringing on the United States. And I think that that is what we all should want for good governance. No matter how you affiliate yourself, you should want somebody that is going to keep it real with you and be honest with you and transparent with you. And that is what you will get. So regardless of how much he tries to cheat, I am truly believing, just like nobody showed up for him for his little birthday parade, but the American people came out for free to let him know that there are no kings. I don't care what he tries to do. I'm truly believing that the American people are going to show him better than they.
Lo que sucede en Texas es parte de un panorama mucho más grande. Donald Trump sabe muy bien que su ley es impopular. E incluso su política migratoria, el tema que supuestamente es el que lo llevó en el poder, ya no le funciona ni con su base de seguidores. Por eso es que Greg Abbott está intentando rediseñar los distritos electorales en mitad de la década, ¿no? Algo que creo que casi nunca se hace. Y todo esto mientras Trump está intentando distraer al país, inventando teorías ridículas sobre Obama y Epstein. Veamos qué es lo que publicó Trump en Truth Social. Tengo una administración perfecta, elogiada en todo el mundo, pero personas egoístas están intentando dañarla. Todo por un tipo que nunca muere, Jeffrey Epstein. ¿Por qué le damos publicidad a archivos escritos por Obama, Hillary y Comey? Y señores, lo dijo en serio, ¿no? Las respuestas de su propia base fueron demoledoras. Estás perdiendo a demasiada gente. Usted hizo la promesa, señor presidente. Está completamente equivocado. Incluso, ¿no? Sus propios seguidores ya no pueden ni defenderlo. Y justo cuando esta narrativa comienza a derrumbarse, Barack Obama aparece y da un golpe mucho más fuerte. Pues señores, Obama regresa a la arena política y lo hace para recaudar fondos directamente contra Trump y los republicanos. va a estar presente en un evento clave del Partido Demócrata en Nueva Jersey, junto al presidente del Comité Nacional Demócrata, que es Ken Martin, y la congresista Mikey Sherrill, la cual pues es la que se enfrentará al candidato republicano, ¿no? Jack Ciattarelli, en el mes de noviembre, más o menos. Este evento, señores, no solamente va a marcar el regreso oficial de Obama, sino que lo que se busca es impulsar las elecciones estatales que servirán como un termómetro rumbo a las legislativas 2026. Y todo esto, pues, está ocurriendo justo cuando la agenda económica de Trump está siendo rechazada por todo el país, especialmente por las millones de personas que podrían perder su cobertura de salud si es que se aprueba este paquete fiscal. Mientras Trump se desmorona, Obama, amigos, vuelve a la escena. Yo les digo a ustedes, solo por un momento imaginen si Obama apareciera en un podcast de alto perfil, ¿no? Como el de Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Andrew Schultz, hablara directamente del caso Epstein. Señores, eso sería devastador para Trump. Y claro, sería maravilloso verlo, ¿no? Desenmascararlo públicamente. Mientras tanto, pues Jasmine Crockett vuelve también a poner el dedo en la llaga.
I mean, I think that one of the things that this government hasn't realized, or this administration does not realize, is that we are supposed to be problem solvers. And instead, what they continue to do is they continue to break things and make it more difficult for us to fix problems that people are facing. When it comes to these emergencies like this, and with us entering hurricane season, which will definitely most likely impact Texas, Louisiana, Florida, North Carolina, as we just kind of go up and down the coast, it is important to understand whether or not this iteration of FEMA is actually functioning for the American people. I know that it sounds good maybe to be like, oh, the governor needs to take care of it, otherwise it's a loser governor. But the reality is that people need to understand this is about resources, right? And so certain states just don't have as many resources as other states, right? The federal government is taking dollars from all of us, and they've got them in this big bucket. It is important that when you need them, that's kind of like our backup. That's our safety, right? And so we're supposed to be able to call them in for these huge disasters. But as we sent off these letters, unfortunately, we are in the minority, but we sent them off to the Inspector General for Commerce. We made sure we sent a letter off to FEMA. We sent a letter off to NOAA because we want to understand whether or not this administration responded adequately. There are reports that the Secretary, Noam, failed to respond in an adequate time.
It was 72 hours.
72 hours. Seems like a long time. Especially as waters are continuing to rise and people are still lost. In addition to that, we wanted to know, what about these DOJ cuts, right? Let's talk about it. You know, I serve on the DOJ committee. This letter was co-led by Greg Casar, who also serves on Oversight and is from Texas. We need to understand, what was the impact? What does it look like at NOAA? If you've got it down to bare bones, were they able to actually get the information that they needed? And was it just a matter that there was no one there to get that information out? And from Commerce, we want to understand, as it relates to alarms and systems and warning systems, were there people in place to actually warn people? It doesn't seem like any of that existed.
Congresswoman, I am old enough to remember when a natural disaster would strike this country, and it would actually be a unifying moment, and you would have a leader at the national level who would come forward and remind us that this was a time to come together as Americans. It strikes me that this president's response to natural disasters, to crises, is very often bifurcated by whether or not he is talking about red state leadership or blue state leadership. Just listen to his evaluation and critique of a variety of leaders. Take a listen.
I have to tell you, the people here, first responders, the sheriff's office, all of the police, law enforcement, they've done an unbelievable job. Everyone sees what an incredible job the governor did. The federal government is doing a very bad job. They are not doing the job. They don't have people there. They don't have the people. Kamala wined and dined in San Francisco, and all of the people in North Carolina, no helicopters, no rescue. I just got back from a tour of the suffering and devastation in Louisiana. Obama ought to get off the golf course and get down there.
Just a quick note to you and to our viewers after his trip to Texas. President Trump is heading back to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. I think it makes it hard for Americans to assess what they are supposed to expect from FEMA when the evaluation from the president seems to shapeshift based around the politics of the moment. We had your colleague, Congressman Moskowitz, on with us. He made the argument that part of the answer, in addition to reform, is removing FEMA from the Department of Homeland Security. Do you agree with his assessment?
I mean, I don't know that that's going to actually fix it. Obviously, Kristi Noem is way in over her head. To have her be the one that kind of has to oversee this and somehow comes up with this idea or is okay with the idea of putting someone over FEMA who does not realize that there is a such thing as hurricane season, who also says something as idiotic as it's not the federal government that does emergency management, seemingly not understanding exactly what FEMA stands for, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, right? So we definitely have a level of incompetence that honestly, I don't know if moving or shifting to a different department is going to fix, because unfortunately, it seems like the only qualifications that this administration has required of the average person to be in this administration is that they be a Fox News host, which ultimately is not a qualification whatsoever.
Uno de los aspectos más enfermizos en todo este escándalo es como Trump explotó políticamente, ¿no? Una tragedia humana, porque no se limitó a promover teorías, sino que las utilizó para manipular, para desviar, para protegerse. Donald Trump fue amigo de Epstein durante mucho tiempo. Lo encubrió, lo protegió y cayó. Y ahora quiere disfrazarse de una víctima, mientras busca responsabilizar a otros. Eso no es lo mismo que hablar con seriedad sobre cómo prevenir futuras tragedias, ¿no? Como lo hace, o bueno, como lo hizo la administración Biden con las inundaciones en Texas en su momento, ¿no? El gobierno federal ofreció millones para poder mejorar infraestructura para prevención. Y aún así, los funcionarios locales prefirieron rechazar esa ayuda por ideología. Una cosa es explotar tragedias para ganar votos, y otra es gobernar con base en hechos, para que no vuelva a ocurrir. Señores, esa es la gran diferencia entre un partido que busca construir y otro que se dedica a mentir, distraer y desviar la culpa. Ahora bien, señores, quiero que pasemos a hablar del tema de las redadas, porque quiero que se imaginen por un momento que tú trabajas en un invernadero ya desde hace años. Con tu esfuerzo mantienes a tu familia y de repente, sin aviso, aparecen agentes del ICE y te persiguen como si fueses un criminal. Señores, eso es lo que acaba de pasar. Quiero que hablemos de cómo el sistema migratorio estadounidense se ha convertido en una herramienta de terror para miles de personas, especialmente bajo esta administración. Básicamente vamos a ver un video que les voy a colocar en un momento y nos muestra cómo es que la Agencia de Control Migratorio, ICE, ha estado llevando a cabo redadas cada vez más agresivas e incluso invadiendo espacios privados, utilizando perfiles raciales y deteniendo a personas sin una causa real. Y el punto culminante es la historia que vamos a ver de Jamie Alanis García, pues un trabajador agrícola que ha sufrido graves heridas al caer mientras huía durante una redada en California. Pero ojo, no es un incidente aislado, porque esto se enmarca dentro de una política mucho más amplia impulsada por Trump. Veamos el video donde pues entenderemos el contexto.
The conditions that we saw inside this internment camp, which it is nothing less than that description, were really appalling.
We saw humans being held in cages. You heard it from Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. 32 people per cage. 3 toilets in each cage for these 32 people, and their drinking water comes from the toilet.
That was Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Congressman Maxwell Frost describing the inhumane conditions at Alligator Alcatraz after a guided tour today. Their visit comes after a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to stop making immigration arrests without probable cause, ruling that officers in Southern California can't rely on someone's race or the fact that they're speaking Spanish to stop and detain them. Now, I want to take a moment to highlight some of the more horrific scenes we have unfortunately witnessed this week. Take, for example, Jaime Alanis Garcia. He was a Mexican farm worker who spent nearly a decade picking tomatoes at Glass House Farms in Camarillo, California. On Thursday, during an immigration raid that drew protesters trying to protect those workers, Jaime called his family in fear. Moments later, while trying to escape, he fell 30 feet from a greenhouse roof. He suffered severe spinal and head injuries and currently remains on life support. That was arguably the most brutal incident of the week, but unfortunately, it is not the only one. ICE is becoming more public, more aggressive in how it targets migrants. One viral video shows officers chasing a Honduran landscaper into a Southern California surgical center, where staff stepped in and demanded, understandably, a warrant. He was working to send money home for his mother's dialysis. He was eventually arrested anyway. Paula Ramos is still with us. Paula, thank you so much. So, this is just obviously a small sample of some of the terrible things that have happened around the country, and it does kind of feel like some of this is sinking in with the American people. If you look at some Gallup polling that came out this week, it showed that the share of Americans who say that immigration is a good thing for the country is at a record high. It shows that Americans are very unfavorably oriented towards Trump's policies on immigration, which is historically his greatest strength. My question is the tide finally turning on this? Or is this what people voted for?
You know, I think Americans have had an identity crisis when it comes to immigration. I mean, the amount of times that we've had this conversation, we're for, we're against, we're for, we're against. And it feels like to me that Americans have to be confronted with the worst parts of this country. You know, it's only when we see the images of families being separated that we care. That we stop forgetting. It's only when we see ICE storming into private homes without warrants that we care. And so for a country that sells a story of being a country of immigrants, of being a country that believes in the American dream, I think it is time to finally reckon with whether or not this is what we're for or not. Because I'm not so sure that 4 years from now we'll have the same debate. An America that once again votes for someone that is promising mass deportations. What scares me, though, is that there is a new pattern that's emerging outside of our borders, and that is that there is an increasing group of people that are choosing to leave this country and that are reverse migrating. And when you ask them why, it's because they fundamentally have stopped believing in the American dream. And there's something almost liberating, for the first time ever, of letting go and almost seeing America from afar and understanding that it seems from afar that it is this kind of like failing, falling empire. And that I think can have very profound consequences.
Well, in Trump's first term, there was also a lot of loathing and disgust at the family separations policy, right? And Americans became much more pro-immigrant then, and then that faded away. So,
you know what? I actually think I'll say maybe something controversial. One of the reasons why I think Joe Biden won in 2020, I think it's because there was a big moral clarity around this pro-immigration stance that the Democratic Party had. I think 4 years later, in 2024, you had a Democratic Party that kind of tiptoes around their values. They're in this like perpetual identity crisis of, are we for or against? And I think at the end of the day, that helped Trump.
Yeah, I mean, they were running actually in his direction.
Exactly.
But with less credibility because only months or a few years earlier, they had a completely different message. And I think to your earlier question too, Catherine, like, I think two things can be true, which is that this is what people voted for. Mm-hmm. I think if you go back and you listen to Trump's campaign speeches, he was very, very clear about what he wanted to do. You look at the signs.
They had the banners or posters.
But only the bad immigrants, only the criminals and
closely,
the gangbangers.
The idea of bad was very expansive.
Everybody was bad.
They didn't really promise that it was just going to be gangbangers.
Well, it wasn't. It's not only that, but they were also saying these are people stealing your jobs. So to your point, everybody was bad. They were either bad because they were criminals, rapists, and gang members, or they were bad because they were stealing your jobs and taking the jobs of brown people and black people. And so you should hate them and we should get them out for you.
Yeah. So two things can be true. You did vote for this, but then also to see it in action is a completely different experience, I think. Do you see now that this polling has come out? I'm curious how you think Democrats are going to re-strategize around this, because a significant amount of the party still believes that when you're battling against someone like Donald Trump, what you're supposed to do is actually try to meet them where they are and match them on issues like immigration.
Like talk policy.
Exactly. Or try to prove that they have some like level of right-wing bona fides on the issue. Do you think now they'll look at this and go, oh, wait a minute, we can go back to a different message. We can talk about the American dream and the value of immigrants, and that maybe that won't be a huge risk to us?
Or we can say abolish ICE. That was the thing at one point. You remember? Everybody was like talking about abolishing ICE. That was
well, it wasn't. No, I don't think everybody.
No,
and I think Democrats were very freaked out by that. By that slogan.
Correct. But what I meant to say, to Antonio's point, is abolish ICE was something that you could say, and it was a debate within the Democratic Party whether that should be part of the platform. Obviously, they did not go that route, and now we're here in this situation where, as you were saying, they're kind of wishy-washy on what they should do. We've had many members of Congress sit in that chair who I've asked, should ICE be abolished? And they're kind of still tiptoeing around it, even though ICE is acting with more impunity, masks, some are saying that's even illegal.
I think that's what they're trying to figure out, and I think that's kind of the lessons learned from Zoran Mamdani's success. Know that he was very, very clear about what he was for, and I think the lesson here is that it's not enough to be against Trump. No, it's not enough to be against this. They have to be for something, and I think now it's being handed to them. No? Are you or are you not in favor of legalizing the over 11 million undocumented immigrants that are here? And I think part of what happened in 2024 is that there was this very deep disillusionment among a lot of second, third, fourth generation Latinos that have been hearing this message for years. And it's not necessarily that they voted for Trump. They just didn't vote, no, out of pure disillusionment.
I do think that there's an opportunity even there, right? Because right now we're seeing members of the right try to signal to the Trump administration, do not go after amnesty. Do not actually come up with a solution to create legal status for all these workers that companies and communities depend on here, even though at times he's flirted with and suggested. I mean, at one point he even said to R. Von Hilliard, oh, I'm looking at options around doing something like that.
Well, there's not even
workers.
talk about for possible hotel workers and farm workers, because he's facing some kind of pressure that.
But it seems to me to be a window. If I were a Democrat, I would say people have an appetite for that. There's a conversation around that. Why am I not even just, I don't know, proposing something?
Well, this is what I get back to with the good, the prototypical good versus bad immigrants, which is obviously not a way we should categorize people. But it's like people want the immigrants gone, but not their landscaper. Not the person taking care of their elderly mother, not their child's nanny. Those are the good ones, the people that they know personally and who they see as human.
Right.
Those people deserve to stay. It's these, nebulous other scary people who deserve to leave. And I think that Democrats are struggling with how to sort of thread the needle on that quasi-racism, nativism, sentiment that's out there. So.
Well, Paula Ramos, always great to have you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Paula.
Primero que nada quiero decirlo claro. Ver a alguien herido de gravedad por tratar de huir de una redada no debería ser normal, amigos. Pero ahora bajo esta administración de Trump, estas situaciones al parecer se han vuelto una moneda corriente. La excusa siempre es la misma, ¿no? Proteger al país de criminales. Pero aquí viene lo irónico. Este señor Jamie no era un peligro público. Hablamos de un trabajador, un padre de familia, una persona productiva que contribuía a la economía local. ¿Y qué pasó? Que se vio forzado a saltar de un techo porque unos agentes irrumpieron en su lugar de trabajo como si estuvieran en una película de acción. Eso me lleva a criticar directamente a Trump, porque él es el que ha construido esta campaña, ¿no?, sobre el odio a los inmigrantes, pintándolos como una amenaza constante. En sus discursos siempre repetía frases como «solo queremos a los buenos inmigrantes», pero en la práctica, al parecer todos terminan siendo los malos. No importa si hablas inglés, no importa si has pagado tus impuestos o si vienes viviendo más de 20 años legalmente. Si no tienes papeles, eres una presa fácil. Lo peor es que esto no solo afecta a los indocumentados, porque también divide a la sociedad, porque hay mucha gente que dice, bueno, esos son ilegales, se los buscan, pero ¿y cuando ves a un médico, a un enfermero, a un agricultor, a una persona que da un valor a la sociedad tratada como escoria? Amigos, es el mensaje que manda Trump, que puedes justificar la violencia si usas la palabra seguridad. Además, ¿dónde queda la dignidad humana? Las imágenes, ¿no?, de los centros de detención, gente en jaulas, 3 baños para 32 personas, agua contaminada. ¿Realmente eso es lo que representa Estados Unidos? ¿Esa es la gran nación que promete Trump? Sé que algunos dirán que, si no te gusta, entonces no vengas. Pero eso es ignorar la realidad. Muchos inmigrantes vienen a Estados Unidos huyendo de la violencia, de la pobreza, de gobiernos corruptos, que muchas veces tienen apoyo de Estados Unidos. Además, muchos de ellos están en Estados Unidos precisamente porque empresas y comunidades dependen de su trabajo. Entonces, ¿por qué perseguirlos como criminales? Señores, defender la dignidad humana no es ser pro inmigrante, es simplemente ser humano. Pero bueno, ¿qué piensas tú? ¿Qué piensas de estas políticas? ¿Crees que se puede tener seguridad sin violar los derechos humanos? Te invito a que me dejes tus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda como siempre darle like, comparta este contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.